Hello everybody, welcome to this edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're looking to help business owners, business leaders see how coaching can help them and their teams be the people they want to be, achieve the things they really want to achieve in their life. We also aim it at fellow coaches. What we're really looking to do is to show them our experiences and hope that inspires them and helps them develop their own skills and practices. I'm Graham Wiley. I've been coaching business leaders and business owners around the world for the last 2 decades. Nothing more to say now other than get ready, get comfortable. Here comes this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Our subject today is going to be all about management and leadership. I'm really pleased to say I'm joined by my very good friend, Ffrancon Williams, to share his experience of management and leadership. Ffrancon is the Chief Executive of Adra. Adra is a very large housing association in North Wales. But less about him from me and more about him from him. Ffrancon, could you tell the audience all about yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Graham, and hi, everybody. Yeah, as Graham said, I'm Chief Executive of Adra, which is the largest housing association in North Wales. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I ended up as Chief Executive, because I think it sort of gives you some good context. I started life as an engineer, did a degree in electronic engineering, but didn't like that. So then I sought some different things to do, and I ended up in manufacturing, which I really enjoyed. So I had a number of jobs in manufacturing. I started off with British Standards on their accreditation schemes. So I would go around lots of factories and check that the goods were being produced to the right standards. And then that factory would be accredited by BSI. I then went to work for an optical fiber manufacturer, which was a 24/7 operation, which I thoroughly loved. And that got me initially into management, because then I started managing staff. And then I did a fellowship in manufacturing management at Cranfield University, which was my stepping stone, if you like, into senior management and leadership. And then I ended up running a line, if you like, a printed circuit board manufacturing line, high volumes, for a period of time. And then the call of home kicked in, because I am a passionate Welshman. I'm a fully bilingual Welshman, so my first language is Welsh. And I wanted to come home because I'd got fed up of all the travel. So I ended up back home in Bangor and Carnarvon, North Wales, working for the local authority. Became an assistant director there. So I was then well and truly in the senior tier. And that was interesting, moving into the political environment from a hard manufacturing background. And just before that, I'd worked on the railways as well as a senior manager responsible for railway infrastructure maintenance. But I ended up as an assistant director for the local authority in charge of housing. And that was fascinating. And I was responsible for all the housing services, including the maintenance of the stock. And the stock was in poor condition. So that's where stock transfer raised its head, where the option was presented to the tenants, and I led on that process. So that the stock was then taken out of the local authority, which would enable that new body to borrow and invest in the stock. And at that point, the tenants voted for that transfer. And then I applied to become the chief exec of the new organization, which is Adra as we currently know it. That was about 13 years ago now. And then the journey of change, the journey of massive change with Adra began, and very pleased with where we've ended up 13 years down the line. So it's quite a large organization. We manage about 7,000 homes. We build about 250 new homes, and we provide a wide range of services to lots of different individuals, some with vulnerable individuals, dealing with a lot of poverty issues. So very, very rewarding position. And I suppose the final thing I'll say about Adra, which I'm very proud about, is that we're a fully bilingual organization. So our business language is Welsh. About 70% of our tenants are Welsh speaking first language. So it's yeah, a bit different perhaps to what some of the audience may have come across before.
I think it's fabulous to hear all about that, Ffrancon, and thanks for sharing all of that. I think it not only contextualizes your experience, I think it does a bit more than that. It validates it. When we get to the detail of what we're going to talk about, it's not something you read in a book or you studied that simply at Cranfield. It's much more than that. It's hands-on. A cultural change, a leadership change from authority to an independent body will have been, I know, challenging. To get the ball rolling, we often talk about leadership and management in the same sentence. I mean, in your mind, are they different? Do you think of them as two separate subjects, two separate skill sets?
Yeah, good question to kick off the session there, Graham. Have to dig deep for that one. Recognise there's a lot of debate around this particular question, isn't there? Different viewpoints, but I think I do see the two things as different. I see management as different to leadership. So I guess how I would contextualize it is that management, you are set. You're either running. You've got a set of objectives which are set for you, or some targets that are set for you, and you're required to manage your resources to achieve those outcomes, I guess. So, what the targets are, what the activity is, how it's done can be constrained. And I view that as management. And I think the difference for me between management and leadership is a little bit more visionary. Where are we going? What risks do we face? It's that forward thinking, and the skill set around that is quite different, I think, to managing. So I do see them as different in my head in how I think about things.
That's great. I mean, my take on this is really similar. Being very simplistic, I think of leadership as being the vision that identifies what needs to be done, and management is the skill set that gets it done. And clearly, constraints and problems are the bailiwick of the great manager. If you are a leader, you're someone who is visionary, someone who can identify and motivate and inspire people to follow that vision. Do they also need to be able to manage, or is it such a different skill set that it's not important, do you think?
Another great question, Graham. I think it helps if you have the experience of management. I think it enhances your leadership skill set. But I would say also, and we probably recognize quite a few people out there who are very, very good leaders, but who aren't necessarily particularly skilled in the management set. So, you can get great leaders who are very visionary and have, I don't know, an affinity that people want to follow naturally, oozes out of them. And yet they perhaps wouldn't be very good at, delivering a budget or managing a great deal of staff or a complex organizational structure. So I think you can be a good leader without necessarily being able to manage, if that makes sense. But as I said at the outset, I think it helps if you have that experience of managing, because, and the reason I say that is that if you have managed a group of individuals or had to deliver a particular service to a prescribed set of targets, then you have an empathy for those involved. And if you are setting a vision, an exciting vision, then you need to succeed as a leader, then you need individuals to buy into that and to follow that vision. So that empathy with those in management, I think, helps. That's just a personal view, Graham.
No, I think I concur with that. As a coach, I often see people who are really, really good leaders, people who actually can inspire others with charismatic interpretation of opportunity, and yet couldn't organise a bus queue, quite frankly. And or as they say often where I live, couldn't run a bath. But nonetheless, that's still a really important function. And the reverse is true. I see people who are fantastic managers, people who achieve amazing things, but need to be led. They are dependent upon someone pointing them in the right direction, but they'll get there if pointed. What I find interesting is that I think size of organization and indeed type of organization affects this. If you are in a small business, it's very difficult not to be the one doing the vision and doing the doing. It's just there aren't enough of you around. The second thing is often entrepreneurs have got into self-employment, running a business, creating something because they have a vision, whatever that is, and then they've got to find ways of turning that into a reality, and they either do that themselves or they employ people to do that. As a coach, I do absolutely see these differences in action. And they are quite different skills and in quite different modes. And as I say, in different organizations, you might get different mixes of what gets done by whom. So as someone who has led, for example, Adra through an enormous change, what are the sorts of challenges, leadership challenges, that you've seen and tackled?
Numerous, I think is the answer, and perhaps I'll just give you a flavour of a few of them. You mentioned, the transition from a local authority setting into a housing association, as we are, more of a private setting, involved enormous change. So local authority setting obviously is a political decision-making body, and that brings with it a way of working that those involved with that way of working, their masters are the political masters, so they are not always in charge of their own destiny or their services destiny, but they remain responsible for it. So we tupied across 150, I think it was, individuals from that local authority setting where there had been very low turnover as well. So for those individuals, it was a massive, massive change. Some only knew the local authority, hadn't worked for others. So I think one of the things that we worked very hard at was to communicate with staff and to try and alleviate as many fears as they had, because without the staff, nothing happens. And we've always been fortunate with the quality of the staff that we've had. But nonetheless, those staff then needed to align to a different way of working in a different direction. And that wasn't comfortable for many staff. So we needed to support, but also we were required to deliver on the promises that we'd given our tenants. The transfer occurred because they wanted to see change, and there were some prescribed outcomes that we were to achieve, and some of them extremely challenging. So we needed to upgrade the stock, for example, bring them up to a much higher standard within a very short time period. So we had about 136 million, I think it was, investment, which we'd secured by private funding, that needed to be delivered within a 5-year period. And we did achieve a huge challenge then in terms of we'd sold, if you like, the vision and aligned staff to where we wanted to go. Then we had to lead the individuals to deliver the work. So there's all the structures that need setting up, the procurement and that sort of activity. But in the leadership sense, we wanted to do things differently. I wanted to do things differently. One of the things I wanted to do was to make sure that from that massive investment that we maximised the impact of, that investment on our communities here in North Wales. So through our leadership and through the advice that we'd received on procurement and stuff like that, we did things slightly differently so that we could maximise more of that investment than you would do by just appointing one of the big multinational contractors, which would be the normal way of doing things. So that was massive. And then naturally through change, not everybody's comfortable with it. And then there are times when you need to change things and do the more difficult side of things, which perhaps falls into the management more than the leadership, where you had to change things and perhaps sadly change some individuals. But keep your sight on where you wanted to go. despite some of the turbulence along the way. So quite a number of challenges, really. I could go on, but perhaps that gives you a flavour of some.
When you look back and you compare the early stage Adra to the mature Adra that it is now culturally, or as a group of individuals, in your mind, can you see the difference? Can you feel the difference?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's 13 years this year since we transferred, so there has been a natural change in the staff anyway. But like myself, I was one of the original. Well, I applied for the chief exec's position, so I was there from day one, but I wasn't two-peat across, if that makes sense. But we still have many of those dedicated people with us, and they would say that it's a very, very different organisation now. And I think probably to a man and to a woman, they would rather work for this type of setup than the political setup, because I think they achieve more. And then I think they recognize that culturally we've changed. So we wanted people to be empowered, and more empowered than clearly they were in the local authority session, and also more empowered than in our early days, because there was it wasn't command and control, but we had big promises to deliver on, and there was a lot of pressure on individuals, and performance management was a very strong part of our leadership at that time. And that can bring some elements of negativity, which impacts culture, if not handled correctly. And we suffered a bit with that. Whereas now I think we've got the balance culturally in the right place. And perhaps that's not surprising after a long period of time, but it's been a very long journey. So culturally, I think that we've tried to, where we have set a workplace which is a comfortable place to work, and open, where people can speak their minds and they feel that they can influence decisions that impact their sphere of operation and wider, and that we listen to what our staff and our stakeholders tell us, and we try, and as the sailing analogy is, we try and adjust the sail as we go along. So we've got a clear idea of where we want to go, we've got a clear idea of what impact we want to make on our communities and our tenants, and we want to be a leading housing association, and everybody in the organisation plays a part in that. And that's the culture we've tried to set, and that is very different to what it was, certainly within the local authority. A lot of frustration around the direction that was being imposed, set by that political system, as in all local authorities. But we kind of deliver on, if you like, the collective view of where everybody wants to take the organisation. Obviously, that we are the leaders, but we listen and we take note and we adjust those sails, using that sailing analogy, as the wind changes as well.
Yeah, I can see the leadership aspect of that, and you touched on some aspects of the management in terms of performance management and so on, in terms of what worked and what didn't work. Were there any other management lessons that you found during the transition that are worth sharing?
I think there is a danger in, I think I would put it as a housing association, actually, funnily enough, is quite a complicated organisation. So yes, we manage properties, yes, we manage the tenancies, but then there's a whole raft of services, support services and frontline services that provide those services and support to the vulnerable: financial advice, rent collection, antisocial behaviour. So it's a fascinating. So each of those activities are managed by teams and managers who, there's a performance management structure around it, and that's great, and you need that. But I think one of the management difficulties at times is that you get sort of silos set up. So you can get individual management units, I'll refer to them as, performing very, very well, delivering to a set of prescribed targets, but perhaps are operating in isolation of other parts of the organisation, and that creates difficulties across departments. and can create some tensions amongst staff and can have an impact on the culture that you're trying to lead on the organization, or not impose, but try and, the culture of the organization can be adversely affected by sort of everybody being effective in their management spheres, but operating in silos. So we work quite hard at trying to bring people with us to avoid a silo way of working. I wouldn't say that we've cracked it all. It's a constant journey, but we have our eyes on the fact that that's not what we want. And we work very hard amongst the teams and across the teams and with our leadership teams just to try and move things along so it doesn't happen.
We talked about leaders being charismatic, visionary, the person that identifies perhaps what the North Star is that you're all marching towards. Do you think leaders are born, or can they be taught?
Another great question, Graham. I think both it would be my interpretation. I think that some people are born, aren't they, with I have a 17-year-old son, and a 20-year-old son, and it's very difficult that they haven't been born knowing what they want to do, for example. So, but some people are, aren't they? And with that, and I admire those. I'm not one of those either, but those that are born knowing what they want to do and where they want to go are blessed, I think, because that brings with it a huge amount of drive. And similarly, lots of people are born, I believe, with those inherent leadership skills that people warm to. They are truly visionary in that people can stand back and say, gosh, yeah, wow, yeah, I see what that guy or woman is saying. And yeah, that resonates with me, and I'll follow that individual, be it online or physically or otherwise, and that is a gift, I think. So you can be born with that, but equally, I think that, and I speak as a modest Welshman, who doesn't naturally blow his own trumpet, through having managed and progressed nicely along my career, I have learned how to lead. I would say I wasn't a born leader, but I've taken advantage of opportunities, and I have an interest naturally in leadership and management. I probably wouldn't be where I am unless I had that. And I would say that I've honed my skills. Not perfect, but continuously learning. But so I think that you can. There's a bit of both. You can be born, and then you can be through your own attitude needs to be at a certain point to absorb any skills and learning along the way. But yeah, you can. I believe that not everybody, but if you have that drive and interest to learn, and you're prepared to adapt your own behaviors so that you achieve those that are more akin to a leader that individuals will follow, then you can become a leader. You don't have to be born. Would be my view anyway.
I concur with that. I think that's what my experience, both personally and with other people that I work with, bears out. I think you can be a leader just because you have passion about a thing. You want something to happen, and that drive, that energy is just passed to other people, and it just generates a momentum. And that might be very unskilled. It may be really quite crude in many ways, but it will create energy and drive. I think that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is waking up and saying, it is down to me. This is my role. If I don't do this, if I don't point the way, if I don't identify the path, nobody else is going to, and we're going to be stuck literally where we are. And so I think as a senior manager, as a business leader, whatever that position is, you can find yourself in a situation where you take that responsibility, and it's down to you, and it's not something that you're born with, and it's not something you've necessarily chased. It's happened, and that's what you're expected to do. It's what you need to do because that's your role. You mentioned something which I really want to come back to. you mentioned learning and absorbing. Were there any along the way for you, any really big areas that you went to, that you turned to, or experiences that you got that added to your learning in both leadership and in management?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can probably recollect. I mean, been blessed, haven't I, in my career, that I've invested myself in my own development, but I've also been given the opportunity to develop through most of the employers that I've worked with. But I think a couple of things spring to mind. Some might be a bit unusual, but I recall attending a negotiation course when I was beginning to become a senior manager, and I wasn't in a sales role. And I had a very good boss at the time who thought, right, Ffrancon needs to go on that course, and that was one which, to this day, I've still got the notes. And what that opened my eyes to was that, it's all about people, really. It's, a good negotiation is how your people skills and your understanding of who you're negotiating with and what type of person and what drives them and what's important to them comes into the sphere of that activity. And that was a light bulb moment for me, because up until that point, you go through all the management courses and the initial strata as you're going along your career, and you get a lot of performance management. You get a lot of what you've got to read and the theories of how certain activities, procurement, for example, there's a raft of stuff out there on procurement, isn't there? How to do it, the how to do it sort of textbook type stuff. You get a lot of that along your way. And that was, this negotiation course was my light bulb moment. And actually a lot of what goes on is about how those individuals interact and how to negotiate. You can achieve a win-win, and that doesn't have to be a single winner, because sometimes, you have the wrong idea that there needs to be a winner out of a negotiation. Well, a successful negotiation would be a win-win, one could argue. So that was really enlightening. And then I have an interest in people, as probably is coming across. I enjoy people's company. I enjoy people's variety. And yet, as we know, we're the most complicated people on the planet, aren't we? Probably, So another light bulb moment was when I attended an NLP coaching type activity, which was a values and belief system that was being taught, and learned a lot about how the brain works, but fundamentally that the ideas behind that course, that NLP course, the coaching course, was that everybody has a set of values and everybody has a set of beliefs. And the values you're kind of born with, or there's some lifetime events that set what's important to you as an individual. And that's different, across different individuals. So that was really interesting. I thought, never thought about that before. And then you reflect on that to yourself, and there's some psychological profiling that goes on yourself and others in the group. And you think, my God, this is accurate. And I thought, there's something to this. And then the belief side that's more about how, and some of them are limiting beliefs, but, the processes, your experiences over time have formed some of your beliefs. And some of those beliefs can be limiting because of the experiences that you've had. So they may be holding you back, or your thinking is in a certain, you think in a certain way, which has either a negative effect on how others perceive you, or how you carry on your activity. So that values and belief system, and blending all that into a coaching package of learning was an absolute light bulb moment for me. And it helped enormously then with what I was struggling with at the time in my leadership role was, well, how do you influence and change culture within an organization of the size of Adra at the time? And that helped me enormously. And then on a personal basis, the final sort of light bulb thing which I've benefited from enormously is the positive intelligence, the PQ learning package. And I'll summarize that. It builds on a lot of what I've just described, similar to values and beliefs, but actually it helps you more on a personal basis. I think it gives you an understanding of what drives negative thoughts within Ffrancon as an individual, and gives you a set of techniques that helps you understand them, and to try and limit their impact on how you're feeling, really, your negative feelings, so that you can, reduce that negative feeling, so that the positive feeling, the way that you want to feel, wins over. And then that's had a massive impact on myself as an individual. It's reduced my anxiety. I'm a bit of a worrier. So it's helped me recognize, when these negative feelings are taking over, and give me a set of techniques that help me to limit those, and make me more relaxed. And when you're relaxed, clearly, I believe you're more efficient. So those would be the three. Bit of a ramble there, Graham.
No,
Sorry,
it's not a ramble. I tell
yeah.
you, it's really interesting. Just to observe what you said. You've clearly had a long and successful managerial professional career. But the three things you picked on as the light bulb moments, are all about people, yourself and others, and the interface between people. And when you are a manager, and indeed when you are a leader, it doesn't work if you don't connect with others. If you're a leader but you don't connect with other people, it's an ineffective leadership. If you're a manager, short of physical violence, you have to persuade people to do stuff.
Yeah.
And you want willing people, not conscripts. And so it's really interesting that they floated to the top for me. They floated to the top for you as your main learning points. And I think that's really insightful.
Yeah. Can I just say one other thing, Graham, as well? Just as you were talking, there was, COVID. We've all been through COVID. I mean, we've benefited from the online and stuff, and that's been fantastic, and it's transformed the workplace, hasn't it? And you get a connection, don't you, online with people, but it's a different connection, isn't it, to when you interact socially, I'll say, in a face to face. And I think that one of the things I'm struggling with personally is where that's going to end up. Where will we end up in the end? Because for all the reasons that have probably come out in here, people are important to me. I like being around people. I think people are your success. And to read people, then you don't get to read the entire book online. I'm not saying you read the entire book when you meet people, but there's a lot more stuff that you pick up when you're physically in somebody's presence. And I'm sure lots of books will be written on that in due course. But
I think it's
just
really
thought I'd throw that
interesting.
one in as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because obviously we're recording this on video conferencing facility, and what the viewer won't know is that you're wearing your Bermuda shorts as we speak.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not telling you what I'm wearing because that's a secret. You're coming to the end after 13 years of your time with Adra because you want to move on and do something new. And I know when we've talked separately that one of those things you want to do is to work in the non-executive area. What is it that attracts you about that, and what sort of organisation do you think you'd like to be part of in that capacity?
Yeah, it's a big, obviously coming to the end of my time at Adra, was seeking a change. Being a senior leader is is demanding, isn't it? And I also think it's a healthy thing to change, to do different things. So just felt it was the right time for me and the right time for the business, I would say, as well. everybody can bring a certain amount to a business, and I feel that I've contributed what I can to Adra as it is now. So I'm quite excited now about the big decision I've taken to step down. I will continue to work, but yeah, looking forward to some new challenges. So the non-exec type positions are appealing to me because I feel that I can bring my experiences to the table of those organizations who seek a non-exec. And at the same time, I will learn and adapt myself to what I learn from that organization. And the change in setup and organization is something that really attracts me. And I have operated, if you like, as a non-exec. I have been a board member. I've been, school governors and chairs of governors and stuff like that in the past. So I'm not going into that sector new. So I understand the changes, and it's a challenging role, isn't it, to be a non-exec, because you are not effectively the chief exec of that organization anymore, but through your influencing, through your experience, and through your communication to a group of individuals, however many others skilled individuals around the table, you need to use your skill set to move that organization forward without diving in with both feet and thinking that you're still running it. And I fully recognize that, and that does interest and excite me. And so the types of industries, I'm very open, as from a manufacturing background. I've worked in infrastructure rail, which was fascinating, by the way. That's just a brilliant. I like logistics, but I like people, and there's a big moral compass within Ffrancon, in that you want to make a difference. Yes, it's not all about the figures, pounds and profit and all the rest of it. That's very important, obviously, but it's about what difference you make. And I think you can make a difference in all sorts of industries and sectors. So I have a very open mind in many ways, but seeking a change. That's not to say I will not do it in the housing sector, because the housing sector is so varied anyway. But yeah, so I'm open mind, but looking for pursuing a few interests and seeing what will turn up.
Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to bring this chat to a close now, Ffrancon, and thank you very much for sharing everything that you have shared in this edition of the Coaching Conversation. And if there's anybody in the audience that wants to make contact with you, perhaps to seek your advice or talk to you about a non-exec role, how can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I can share my email address as well, if that's appropriate, and mobile numbers. So I'm contactable by all the usual channels. So LinkedIn probably is the international medium, is it? I don't.
It is, yeah. Yeah. And Ffrancon is spelled with 2 F's, very Welsh.
Absolutely.
Spelling of Ffrancon.
Absolutely, yes. Which is the a single F would be a V in the Welsh language. So a double F is not a typo. It's the correct spelling.
Ffrancon, thank you very much once again. And everybody, that's it for this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you again next time. Bye. So there you have it. That was the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope it was useful. Hope it did what it was meant to do for you. If you want any more information about our coaching practice, it's at the executivemindset.co.uk. While you're there, you can book your own free session, which will give you a much deeper insight to what coaching can really do for you. If you enjoyed the session, please give us a good rating. And if you want to reach out for further information, do email me at theexecutivemindset@sagegreen.com. That's about it for this time, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.